So welcome all. Just want to greet you for a second and tell that we're going to wait for a couple of more minutes for all the people who want to follow this event to join. So please be here and be patient. So, okay, I can get to the technical introduction for this time as we wait for others to join. Welcome, first of all, to this webinar, to this online event. My name is Milan Aleksic. I'm representing NGO Atina, which is organizing this event today, and I'm going to be facilitating this event to its very end. So this is an online event through the Zoom platform. As many of you expressed the intention to follow, to participate, be part of this event, we decided actually to live stream this event on our Facebook page, on NGO Atina's Facebook page. So all of you who could not apply and join us via Zoom can follow the event on Facebook. This is one technical detail. The other one is that we're gonna record, we actually started recording the event already. So if any one of you does not feel comfortable of being seen at the event, you can just simply switch off your cameras. For all the technical issues and the questions you wanna ask, you wanna post, you can use it in, you can do it in the chat box if you are following the event via Zoom platform, and if you are following our live stream on Facebook, you can post your questions in the comment section below the live stream. Since now it's already 5 minutes after noon, I think we can slowly start, and for those colleagues who are late, they can join us at any point of this event. So once again, welcome to this webinar entitled Ending Trafficking and Violence Against Girls and Women in the Context of Global Migrations. This particular event is organized as a part of the project NGO Atina. My organization implements in partnership with the European Feminist Network White Plus within the project called Expanding Spaces for Capacity Building and Exchange to Strengthen Women Migrant Movement Building Across Europe 2021. So as you could already hear, the focus of today's event is migrations, and particularly women in migrations. And our special focus will be put on the UN CEDAW document called General Recommendation No.38 and entitled Trafficking of Women and Girls in the Context of Global Migrations, which was issued by this committee 6 months ago on November 6, 2020. So we're gonna, as I have said, focus on this particular document to see what what does new bring this document, and how should we perceive it, how should we use it? We, I mean, mainly civil society organizations, because this event was particularly intended for civil society organizations from Serbia and other countries in the region on the Balkan migration route, but wider in Europe as well, to see how we can utilize it in our attempts to facilitate the position and improve the position of the most vulnerable ones among the refugee and migrant populations, which are women and girls. Today, we're going to talk with 4 our colleagues, and they will provide us different perspectives of this issue. So we're going to talk with Ms. Dalia Reinarte, who is the member of the UN CEDAW committee, but also the professor at Vytautas Magnus University in Kaunas in Lithuania, as well as the fellow commoner at Lucy Cavendish College at the University of Cambridge. And Ms. Reinarte, thank you for being with us today. We're going to also talk with Ms. Hajar Mohammadi, who is the women's rights activist from Sweden, and who has particular experience from the migration itself. So we're going to hear something about this experience. Then we're going to talk with Ms. Dubravka Vranjanac, who is the program director in Save the Children in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and with Ms. Despina Siri, who is the director of the Symbiosis School of Political Studies in Thessaloniki, in Greece. And they will provide us with the perspective from Bosnia and from Greece, being the exit and entry zones for migrations, and in a way inform us about the current developments in these 2 countries. We're gonna follow the agenda you have received, and as so to say, framed introductory from my side, I will say something about this event, about the goal. As I have already mentioned, our intention was to reveal the migration situation and its significance for women from inside, and we also want to try to understand by this event CEDAW documents and how to utilize them for advocacy actions in the states parties of the CEDAW convention, which is also in all the countries on the Balkan migration route being signatory parties to this convention. As you may know, the CEDAW committee is mandated by the Article 21 of the convention to develop general recommendations as sort of an instrument for clarifying states parties' obligations to combat discrimination against women and girls. This particular General Recommendation 38 actually contextualizes the implementation of the obligations to combat all forms of trafficking as stipulated by Article 6 of the Convention, which is aimed at suppressing all forms of trafficking against women. The Recommendation 38 sets out practical guidance on implementing anti-trafficking interventions that are based on a gender transformative and intersectional approach, with particular focus on realizing women's and girls' human rights as a strategic priority for achieving sustainable development. So this is something that is already written in this particular document, but more in detail about the idea behind this document and different provisions of the document we're gonna later on hear from Ms. Dalia Reinarte. I also wanted to remind us all that the UN CEDAW Convention is one of the main instruments for eliminating discrimination against women, and that it was adopted in 1979, and 2 years later, in 1981, former Yugoslavia actually adopted and ratified this convention, which means that in our region this year it's actually 40th anniversary of this convention. And since former Yugoslavia does not exist any longer, all countries which succeeded former Yugoslavia actually succeeded the ratification of the convention. Besides former Yugoslav countries, all other countries in the Balkan region, meaning Albania, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey, which are actually all countries on the Balkan migration route, signed this convention. So basically, the provisions of the convention and of the general recommendation apply to all of these countries. Most of you listening to this event and being present here are actually from these countries. So I hope and I suppose that this event will be helpful for all of us to try to find a way to work more and work jointly, work together with the CEDAW committee and other international organizations to make our home states follow the provisions of this general recommendation and finally make the life for these women better. Once again, thank you all for being here. And I just want to say that we have here representatives from various NGOs from the region, but also from international organizations, from UN agencies from the region and abroad, from the Council of Europe, from some state and local authorities. But again, most of you are coming from, so to say, NGO sector. And once again, I would like that we all get from this event with some knowledge how to use all of these instruments better. I think this was more than enough for my introduction. Again, whenever you have some questions to ask, please use the chat box on Zoom platform or section for comments on our Facebook profile. And now let's get to our speakers. And I would like to ask Ms. Hajar Mohammadi as our first speaker, again, who is the women's rights advocate from Sweden, to tell us something more about her own experience from the migrations. What does it mean? What did it mean to her? And what does it mean for women in general? So please, Ms. Mohammadi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Milan. Thanks a lot. So women's migration, its consequences have become a major challenge today. The various dimensions of the fellow have affected different parts of our life. These days, studying and exploring migration with different perspectives and methods have become a necessity. First of all, as a girl who was forced to migrate at the age of 20, I want to talk about the social causes and consequences of women's migration. Hello to everyone. I'm Hajar Mohammadi, a psychologist and women's rights activist. Before to moving Sweden, I was TV presenter. I was really famous in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country where it's really hard for women to have a job like journalist and to work in public, because culture and society has made life difficult for women there. Many people ask me what it looks like to be born as a woman in Afghanistan. The answer is simple. Every fight is your fight. You have to fight and conquer all your basic rights, even though they should be guaranteed to you. The right to education, the right to decide, the right to work, the right to choose a husband, or to put it simply, a woman has no right to make decisions for her own body. Everything you want to do, someone is coming and saying, no, you cannot. Why? Because you're a woman, you belong to me. Simple. Woman means property. When war and insecurity are added to this, it no longer makes sense to be strong and to fight there, because I fight too much. But when I feel unsafe there, I was thinking to, what's mean that to stay in here and fight because I'm not strong enough? You must escape and save your life. At the end of 2015, I was forced to migrate from my country to Europe. If you are traveling from Kabul to Belgrade, you will probably need just 6 hours flight. For me, it was 2 years experience of dangerous migration path. In these 2 years, I went through very, very different events. I saw different people, and most of all, I listened to the stories of other women on the move. The world of migration from inside and outside are two different stories. When you meet migrant woman, she will talk to you and share her experience through and feeling through the narrative that you can handle. But her unique experience is deep inside her. That's written in every step that she have made to be where she is now. That's written in her dreams and her fears, which were not shared. That's written in every breath she took before she fell asleep in some unknown place on her road where she was scared of being raped, robbed, or separated from her family. I remember how scared we were when someone told us the door lock was broken. And we couldn't stop thinking that someone would come into the room when we fell asleep. Even now, I remember how scared I was when I was going to public toilet to get a shower in those situations of choose and lack of protection system. Abusers can carry out their action very easy. Of course, when abuse occurs, women and girls do not seek help due to ignorance, lack of resource and support system. I witnessed the situation where family members of those women, girls, under severe pressure also made decisions for women and girls that further endanger their lives and well-being. What I have learned and what we have to, and what we have in our minds, that those women and girls have dreams and plans to achieve. The ideals and their idea that they will have better facility and better condition to study or work in the destination country and have equal rights to be able to decide for themselves is keeping them alive and moving them to the goal. This road is covered with many obstacles for all migrant women and girls. And every battle is still their battle. Not in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria this time, but in Serbia or Sweden or in some other country. Multiple discrimination based on their origin, ethnicity, gender, migrant label will follow them. And sometimes they are directly linked with situation of social isolation, stigma, or violence they are facing. Migrant women and girls need strong allies all over the world from every field. We need governments not only to adopt the strategies, but also to implement them. We need international bodies and mechanisms to find a way to monitor those improvements and to define the sanctions. We need civil society organization and non-government organization and women activists to fight with us in conquering our social, economical, and political rights all over again and prevent their neglect by the system and the structure. We need every woman to see us and understand as a woman. That is who we are and that is our power. I'm so glad that the Atina organization gave me the opportunity to share my experience with all of you here. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Well, thank you, Hajar. Thank you for sharing your experience from the migration with all of us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being strong. And it's because of you and other women that we have to work together, that we have to work hard, that we have to have all of us and all of these instruments you mentioned abroad to make the migration itself easier and to make the position of all of women in migrations easier and better. So thank you again. And now I would ask Ms. Dalia Reinarte to tell us something more about the CEDAW committee itself. How does it work? And then later on, we'll get to this General Recommendation 38 more in detail. Ms. Dalia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone. And it's my pleasure to talk to you right now and then to have a discussion with all of you. And my particular thankness goes to Atina, NGO Atina, that invited me to have this opportunity for interaction and presenting the CEDAW committee's work and specifically General Recommendation 38. And I am very grateful to both Milan and Yelena that I am here with you today. And actually, I am also very much grateful for the structure of the program itself. Just because listening to Hajar right now, I was thinking that the main goal of our General Recommendation 38 was actually just to reflect as much in a better way as possible what she said and what is ingrained in her experience as a migrant woman and in experiences of all migrant women. So I'm really grateful for this format of the program, just because it was really great to start from Hajar. And then when we will be listening to other speakers from Greece, from Greece and from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who are practitioners working in the field of combating trafficking in women and girls, they will tell us actually whether CEDAW committee succeeded in reflection of what has been said by Hajar in our General Recommendation 38. So it's an excellent format of this event. Just now, I will ask to move to a few slides of PowerPoint that I presented. And yes, thank you very much. And before I start answering to questions prepared by Atina and before expressing my own views on the issue and on General Recommendation 38, I have to make sure that here today at this event, I do not speak on behalf of the CEDAW committee. Here I'm speaking as an expert, an independent expert of CEDAW committee, as a member of the CEDAW committee, but I do not speak on behalf. There is a difference in expressing myself as independent expert and speaking on behalf of the CEDAW committee. Now our focus will be on General Recommendation 38 that has been prepared by this committee that you see on the photo. Photo comes from 2017, 2018, exactly when idea of general recommendation has been adopted during my chairing, actually, of the CEDAW committee. And then answering to the questions, I will elaborate more. Why this topic, and why at this time, and what was the process of the adoption. But now, please move to the second slide. I just want to say that we are talking about CEDAW Convention. It's the United Nations Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women that was adopted in 1979. And we are talking about the shortest article of this CEDAW Convention, Article 6, which exactly states, take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to suppress all forms of traffic in women and exploitation of prostitution of women. So never ever before in CEDAW's history, and actually in any legislative history of any national country, this sentence has been more developed, more explained, and more elaborated than in the CEDAW's General Recommendation 38. And actually, the structure of General Recommendation 38 from the first glance is very complicated, and it's a long General Recommendation, but the essence is very simple. And we are moving to the next slide. And we can say that the most important thing, and again, I will explain later during our questions and answers why, we are focusing on root causes of trafficking in women and girls. And these should be addressed like root cause, like trafficking encouraged by such a root causes like social, economic injustices, then situations of conflict and humanitarian emergencies that encourage trafficking in women and girls, then discrimination in asylum regimes that causes trafficking in women and girls, then demand that fosters exploitation and leads to trafficking. And here we are talking not about only trafficking for sexual purposes, but almost about all forms of trafficking in women and girls. And then increased use of digital technology in trafficking, again, in women and especially in children during COVID-19. So please, let's move to the last slide. And here we have a very simple structure of General Recommendation number 38, that we are thinking the most important thing for civil society and the governments in order to suppress trafficking in women and girls is to improve victim identification, support, and protection services via all stages of migration. We also say that it's very much important to investigate, prosecute, and convict all perpetrators involved in the crime, including those on the demand side. And here is very much a specific angle of CEDAW General Recommendation 38, because most probably in all domestic legislative frameworks that are focused on trafficking in human beings, all of them, they say to investigate, prosecute, convict all perpetrators, but only few of them make this link with the demand side, the necessity of addressing the demand side. And then CEDAW committee also calls for bringing perpetrators to justice and secure adequate financial remedies for victims. Again and again, from the first glance, it seems nothing new, but CEDAW committee in General Recommendation 38 says you should increase all efforts to bring perpetrators to justice, just because what victims want is to bring their those perpetrators and those traffickers to justice. And then we say that when national governments, some of them, they are trying to secure remedies for victims, we are saying instead of establishing governmental funds for remedies for victims of trafficking in women and girls, you should use those money that you are taking from the bank accounts of traffickers themselves. And that would make the link. The more you would bring, the more many perpetrators you would bring to justice, then the more and the bigger and the adequate remedies would be applied for victims of trafficking. And then it's absolutely, I would say, new, even though we will talk about convention of 1949 on abolition of prostitution and trafficking in human beings. But again, in our days, it's a very innovative aspect that was brought in our General Recommendation 38. We recognize prostitution as gender-based violence against women. And as such, it should be abolished or fight and never recognized as a job. So this is a few highlights and few points for our further discussion on General Recommendation 38. Thank you very much. So now I am open for questions and answers, and will follow Milan's instructions.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Leinart. Thank you for this introductory part, for the process of making this general recommendation, and for giving a bit of the light of its importance for all of us, not only practitioners and representatives of NGOs, but of others, and particularly of the state authorities. So yeah, we're gonna get through some questions to understand better the entire process of making general recommendations as instruments of the CEDAW committee, also of the, so to say, powers the CEDAW committee has in monitoring the implementation of general recommendations in state parties, as well as to different aspects that this particular document is covering. So at the beginning, could you tell us actually why the topic of combating violence against women and girls is more important today than ever before, and why it brought us actually to this very general recommendation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Milan. So it was absolutely clear and evident for many years in the CEDAW committee But in 2017, we started thinking about about the topic of new general recommendation for the CEDAW to be developed. And there we have 3 topics suggested by all experts of CEDAW committee. One of them was cultural stereotypes, very important topic. Topic number 2 was indigenous women. And the third topic was trafficking in women and girls in the context of global migration. And we had such a heated debates over which one topic should be the first one, just because CEDAW and the Secretariat, they didn't have neither financial nor human resources to work on simultaneously on few general recommendations. So we had to choose. And then the second topic would have waited for 3, 4, or some years. So we voted, and the topic on trafficking in women and girls was selected as a priority topic. And the rationale behind was that, as I said, Article 6 is the shortest article in the CEDAW Convention. Some other articles are much more elaborated. And in addition, we so far, starting from 1982, when the CEDAW Committee was created and started working, we developed so far 37 general recommendations. So in order to explain more, in order to update our knowledge on different articles of CEDAW Convention, we are developing our general recommendations. So all those articles, 16 articles of our CEDAW Convention, they have been up to 2017 somehow updated more or less, or some of them in a very detailed and very upscaled way through general recommendations, but not Article 6. So what we had, and what civil society had, and what national governments had, it was only that one sentence that I introduced in the beginning. So what we noticed, and I wrote a report on that in 2016, and I introduced it to my colleagues in the CEDAW committee. What we had a situation when every 4 years national governments would arrive to Geneva to report on implementation of CEDAW committee, and of course on implementation of Article 6. And it was increasingly clear that all governments doesn't matter whether these are governments in African region, whether these are governments in Western Europe, the language on Article 6 are just the same. Very, very similar. All national governments, usually they had national laws regarding traffickers. They are criminalized, meaning activities are criminalized. Then they would have strategies, action plans, some funding, commissions created on a very high level, on a prime minister's level, or on minister's level. But when we would ask, how many perpetrators you brought to justice in last 5 years, they would say 2, 3, 5, just meaning nothing. Then the most of national governments, when they were talking on Article 6, the language was increasingly gender neutral. Nobody talked about trafficking in women and girls. Nobody talked about trafficking in migration. Everyone talked about using very general concepts about trafficking in human beings. Actually, they were talking in language and framework of Palermo protocols. So CEDAW committee would never receive any reliable data from national governments, and also we never had any satisfactory discussion with civil society, just because civil society, again, but most probably it is interdependent phenomenon. If the national governments are not so much focused on the issue for real, to combat trafficking in women and girls, to address root causes, to stress that trafficking in women and girls mostly, actually, what we are talking about is trafficking for sexual purposes. And women and children consist around 80% for this form of trafficking. And civil society also, in many countries, they didn't operate with statistics, and they couldn't tell us how many shelters specifically they would have for victims of trafficking in women and girls. So it was clear that we should make some conceptual, theoretical new approaches if we want really to reduce trafficking for women and girls. We have to make this interlink between trafficking for sexual purposes to make sure that it's 80% of all forms of trafficking, to make interlink between exploitation of prostitution, or better to say prostitution, because clients and markets are the same, and then to say it clear, to come back to Palermo Protocol that is forgotten, that please, let's talk about the demand side. So this was the main aspects that we decided that it's urgent, that we have to develop a new general recommendation, which in general, as I said, is not as much new in regarding of assistant identification, but general recommendation makes sure that when we talk about trafficking, please don't use gender neutral language, and please talk about women and girls as the main subject of this, as main victims of trafficking. And let's please talk about money behind this crime and about the demand side.
Well, thank you, Ms. Leinarti, for this information on the process itself and on the idea, how the CEDAW committee got the idea to tackle this particular topic in this last recommendation. And speaking about the civil society, I would also like to ask you to reveal a bit the very role of the civil society in making this particular document, because CEDAW committee actually invited interested parties, including civil society organizations, to bring their comments, to bring their inputs in the draft document. And I would like to know, and I think that all of our colleagues would like to know, how does it look like when you get these comments, when you get these inputs? How do you incorporate them into the final document, being very actually diverse? And I also wanna add that my colleague Jelena, she posted this general recommendation in the chat section. So whoever of you want to see the document or didn't have the opportunity to see it can click on the link in the chat box. So please, Ms. Leinarti.
Okay, thank you very much. So the process itself of adoption of any general recommendation CEDAW is long and complex. And before that, it took almost 6 years to adopt, for example, general recommendation on education. of women and girls. But keeping in mind the urgency of this topic, we work really very intensely and hard, and we adopted a little bit more than in 2 years. So at the beginning, you have, as I said, explained, you have to choose a topic. Then we are creating a so-called working group among our experts of the CEDAW committee who wish to contribute to the drafting process. And then we develop a concept note. And the concept note is shared with the public, with the governments, and with civil society. And we, as you said, rightly said, CEDAW committee then asked for commentaries on this concept note. And it was for the first time in general in human rights treaty bodies on their development of general comments, some human rights treaty bodies call it, and general recommendations, that we received over more than 200 written submissions on our concept note. And then we studied all answers from different angles, just because the topic involves many sensitive issues. It's not only prostitution, sex work versus abolitionist approach. No, it's also migration. It's very sensitive issue. So we read, we discussed, and we incorporated different approaches into our first draft. And then it was announced a day of general discussions in Geneva. It was open to civil society again, and to governments through the missions that reside in Geneva, so that to comment again on the first draft. And again, it was, I think it was around 300 or more written submissions that we received. All of them are right now put on our CEDAW's website, and you can read. And again, I remember very well how contradictory they were. Some of them would say, please, you do not talk at all about abolitionist approach regarding prostitution. You should stress it. Some of them would say, no, it's violation of human rights. You should define prostitution as an economic activity, as a work. Then I remember regarding migration, some state parties would say it's not under your mandate to decide how you should deal with migration processes, because it's up to national laws. So we are trying to incorporate some constructive suggestions, but of course, CEDAW committee has. For example, I can bring example, maybe the most sensitive one, because some NGOs, they requested that we would have dealt only with trafficking without exploitation or prostitution, meaning there we are request to split Article 6, just to split Article 6 to two parts, and include in General Recommendation 38 only trafficking. That would mean that we are talking about trafficking in women and girls only using economic concepts, and only using trafficking in the labor market. So CEDAW committee said no. We are basing our General Recommendation 38 is based primarily on the article of CEDAW Convention, Article 6. And Article 6 is indivisible. You cannot to split it to two parts. So, and there is already interrelation between trafficking in women and girls and exploitation of prostitution. So the essence, meaning the heart of the general recommendation is primarily based on CEDAW Convention itself, then on 1949 Convention on abolishing prostitution and combating trafficking in human beings, and on Palermo Protocols, and on other relevant documents, but on Rome Statute also. But these one are the most important one. And so that is how, and then we had the regional consultations in all regions of the world, 6 or 7 of them, for African countries, for North African countries, for Gulf countries, Arab countries, for Caribbean and Latin American countries, for Scandinavian countries, Western European countries, and Eastern European countries. It was the first time when in human rights treaty bodies, any document was so, I dare to say, so well prepared. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this detailed information on the process and on the role of the civil society in the process, and on explaining us how this committee actually decided to tackle both issues, so trafficking in women and girls and the prostitution, as it's both written in the Article 6 right of the CEDAW Convention. One more question to give us more in detail the content of the convention itself, and then I will ask our other speakers to tell us something about the situation on the ground, and then we'll come back to you and continue with the questions, because there are lots of questions, inspiring questions that can enlighten up the significance of this document and the way we should read it and we should use it in our future work. So please, if you could share with us some details from the document itself, what does it bring new, and why actually it's important to have this particular general recommendation on Article 6.
So I think all of you have this general recommendation, so the content of this general recommendation. So as I said, for us, it was very much important to address root causes. As I said, we saw from the dialogues, constructive dialogues with state parties, that root causes are not the most important phenomena that national governments are trying to tackle. Everything has been what we saw from the dialogues with them. We saw they are trying to make trafficking in human beings as a criminal offense, fully criminal offense, focusing themselves on traffickers, on perpetrators, but on the other hand, they said it was almost without any results, I have to tell you. And then they were trying to just to focus themselves on the assistance for victims. But we decided that that general recommendations should incorporate human rights approach, tackling issue of trafficking in women and girls, and that is why root causes became our primary goal. And named them. Then again, assistance and protection for women and girls victim of trafficking. But actually, if you go through the recommendations for this part 5 of our general recommendation, you will see that assistance and protection is the recommendations are really innovative, and everywhere we are talking from the gender perspective, not from the perspective that is too general. So and again, part 2, part 6 is victims' access to justice. I also mentioned it, and these are actually 3 main structured parties of our general recommendation. So I will not go through the part of recommendations, just because I would like to, for example, like we kept many details, practical details when we were designing our recommendations. For example, I know, and it was mentioned in the first presentation of our event, it was said our room in detention center was broke down, and women and girls, they didn't know how what comes next. But we also, and I as the chair of this working group, for example, I knew visiting Greece that women and children have been, migrant women and refugees have been, and most probably still are, they are separated from each other. Women and their children are separated, and they are put into different facilities in detention centers. And they know, for example, that in many of them there are no locks at all. So keeping in mind all those details that we have been receiving through these technical regional meetings that I mentioned before, we designed our recommendations. But I think it would be better than colleagues from Bosnia-Herzegovina who are practitioners, and from Greece, they would let us know whether they are really specific enough. For example, we know that in Gulf countries, women are more vulnerable, migrant women are more vulnerable to be trafficked just because of kafala system. Then we know that in some countries, because of very restrictive migration laws, for example, men would receive visas, but for women who wants to receive a migrant status, the governments request specific things, such as to prove that they have some independent income. How come? If they are, for example, housewives of those men who already received migrant status. So these are details that I believe we succeeded to reflect in our recommendations part. So, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Quite a lot of details and information you've shared with us, and thank you for this. And we'll get back to you, Ms. Leinarte, to reveal some other aspects of the convention and of how to use it actually, how we should utilize this instrument, as I have said, in our future work. But now, as you have also mentioned, the situation in the region, in the countries of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Greece, let me pass the floor to my colleague Dubravka Vranjanac from Save the Children from Bosnia, who is the practitioner who has a lot of valuable knowledge and experience from the ground, working in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Serbia, to tell us a bit more on the current situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as this country is for the last couple of years, so to say, hotspot on the Balkan migration route, and one of the main directions for migrants to travel to other countries of the European Union. So, Ms. Vranjanac, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Thanks you for inviting me, and thank you for the excellent presentations. Very inspiring and very detailed. So the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is the refugee and migrant situation started emerging in 2018. Since then, around 75,000 refugees and migrants officially transited through Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is not, there is no available information on how many women and girls were among these 75,000. So one of the issues is that the gendered breakdown of the data on migration generally in the region in many countries is not available. What we know that in the country at the moment, there is around 7,000 refugees and migrants. There is a significant portion of those who are out of reception centers, and many of them are also women and girls. So while they stay out of reception centers, they do not have access to services, they do not have access to protection. They mostly stay in unsafe private accommodation, in abandoned houses, and so on. Bosnia is considered as a transit country, and almost everybody who enters Bosnia and Herzegovina is trying to rapidly leave the country and to continue a journey towards the EU, to cross the border with Croatia. So when entering Bosnia and Herzegovina, all population, including women and girls, are trying to avoid the officials, the official border crossings, and also like the border police. So they are coming through the hidden, invisible routes. They are traveling from one part of the country to another, and they are mostly traveling with the groups of other refugees and migrants, among whom often are smugglers. We did a research, Girls on the Move, which included Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Greece. And all girls who were interviewed within this research said that at least in one part of the country, they were traveling with the smugglers. And the smugglers are always perceived as a very powerful figures from who their life depends in one momentum, which is very, very dangerous. The key challenges, there are many challenges in working at the ground. So the first thing is, of course, identification. As most of the population comes without the documents, the identification and family profiling are, the procedures are sometimes poor. So women and girls are often, those who are traveling alone are often claiming that they are traveling with their families who are actually not their families. So one of the key challenges is actually to identify unaccompanied girls, for example, because they wouldn't really say that they are traveling alone because they feel more protected when they are with the others and with the groups. But also sometimes it's not that they are feeling safer, but that they are threatened and that they are forced to actually claim that they are part of the family that that is not their family. Another problem is, of course, the fact that we are talking about a hidden population. So as we have the powerful networks, or the networks that the girls and women perceive as powerful, it is a question whether they perceive those who should help them as more powerful than those that they are afraid of. Do they see the institutions, the police, the supporters, NGOs, or anybody else as powerful enough, as interested enough to really provide protection to them? So this is one of the key questions that we should ask ourselves. Another challenge is the focus on continuing the journey. So as Bosnia is not perceived as a destination country, but only as a transit country, the key focus is very often just to continue journey, and the majority of girls and women do not see any kind of the future or opportunity for them to be in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so they would rather choose to continue journey if they are in danger than to stay here. There are many other challenges that are there. One of the things that I would like to mention is, beside of the what we see at the ground is that when accessing services, for example, accommodation, food, non-food items, and so on, women are and girls are most often, and they are prioritized compared to the others because they are perceived as a vulnerable group, and they would have the priority, and they would be the first one to be accepted to the reception center if there is no sufficient space. On another hand, the men are not prioritized, and for them, many services are not available. So for them, it is much harder to access the accommodation. And this also brings a risk for women, even though they are prioritized as a vulnerable, because then the men would have the strategy to have the access for the to access to services, because they would take the women with themselves and pretend that they are a family, so they have easier access to services, so they are not disembarked from the buses, so they have access to the public transportation which they need. So this is also something that should be taken into account. The services for the whole population, not only for women and girls, can also influence the safety and gender, and can be a gender risk for the women. And also what we have noticed at the ground is that there is a lack of specialized services for those who are at risk or identified as potential victims or survivors. So beside of lack of the specialized services, there is also a lack of access to durable solutions. So asylum process and integration are very hard to be for anybody to gain the asylum. The resettlement for those who are particularly vulnerable and have access for that to other countries is not available. And cases of family reunification for example, girls who are separated, or for women or for anybody else, is almost there are only few cases. The procedures are too lengthy, so the family members are usually not choosing to go through the regular legal procedure, but they choose to put themselves in a risk and go on the journey of unsafe migration just to reunite with their family members who are in other countries. So this is kind of a short induction, and if there are other questions, I'm here to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Vranianac. I have some questions in regards to your experience from the ground and to potential links with the CEDAW itself and the document we are being presenting today, but I will leave it for a bit later. Now I would like to get to Ms. Despina Siri to continue with the same, so to say, explanation of the situation from the ground. So we have heard about the challenges and about the current situation in Bosnia, and let us move a bit to Greece. Greece is another, so to say, hotspot on the Balkan migration route, as most of the refugees and migrants in Bosnia, in Croatia, in Serbia, in North Macedonia are coming actually through Greece, and those to Greece are mainly coming from Turkey, right? But let us ask Ms. Despina to tell us more in detail about the current developments in respect to migrations in Greece. Please, Ms. Siri, the floor is yours. Sorry, we cannot hear you. If you can switch on your microphone.
Sure. I was saying thank you so much. Atina, for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I would fully agree with the previous speakers exactly on the importance of the migration framework in this discussion, and on the need to focus on implementation of the international agreement.
Sorry, we cannot hear you at the moment. If maybe it would be better if you switch off your camera because of the connection. Let's try it in this way. If you could hear me, Ms. Siri.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
All right.
So if you could repeat what you have said.
Yeah, I'm very glad because the discussion today is has situated the question of trafficking and the elimination of violence in the general framework of migration, because it is not just an issue of developing more international recommendations, legal instruments in order to combat this situation, but also how these are carried in their implementation in the specific lives and livelihoods and everyday realities of migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, trafficked women, girls, boys, and of all of us, civil society organizations, representatives, humanitarians working on the ground. And Greece is a very ripe and mature site where you see all the complexities of this world developing. You have the UN organizations and agencies, the EU, European Commission, previously it was ECHO, sort of the Greek state, Greece being a member state of the European Union for 40 years now, signatories to all international conventions and European Convention, the European acquis supposedly framing the discussion, but government, the state having the competence on migration, such as all EU member states have, and that is very relevant for EU accession countries as well. And you see what is happening on the ground is that with Europe moving to a more phobic, restrictive approach towards migration, far more hesitant to welcome people, often very necessary people, to its mainland, the situation in the border countries, in the periphery, is becoming far more aggravated daily. I'm coming from a discussion, an urgent meeting among country directors of organizations working on international and national, working on migration, UN agencies as well, because only 2 days ago we had a decree signed by 2 ministries that was saying that asylum applications from countries for people from 5 countries, including Afghanistan, Syria, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Somalia, will not be, this is 70% of the asylum seeking population in Greece, will not be taken into account and examined in Greece. Turkey is a safe country for asylum applications, so these persons have to be returned to Turkey so that they have their asylum applications considered there. This is not a decision solely of the Greek national government. Of course, it is with the support of the European Commission. And therefore, we see this externalization of the governance of migration and forced displacement, asylum seeking, dealing with violence, dealing with persecution, becoming far, far stricter and repressive. So yeah, indeed, to move to our topic, Greece is a transit yet also a destination country for women migrants, mainly trafficked for sexual exploitation, forced labor, and forced begging. As Greece is one of the entry points for migration flows into Europe, potential victims of trafficking may be identified amongst the asylum seekers and the undocumented migrants entering the country. Looking at gender vulnerabilities on the ground and specific challenges during reception is extremely important. I'm not even discussing integration, since this is really very far down the road, if it ever happens. Most women and girls report having been sexually abused during the journey to Europe and exploited in exchange for financial support, documentation, or transport. Upon arrival and reception in Greece, many cases never get reported due to fears of stigma or retaliation, limited availability of or access to services, and lack of awareness about the benefits of seeking care and of reporting. There are gaps in the provision of legal counseling and representation for the broad category of gender-based violence cases, which can impact, of course, survivors in many, many different ways. Survivors, for example, of intimate partner violence may not be informed about their right to have separate asylum claims from their partners, which may force them to stay in abusive and dangerous relationships, very often including being trafficked. Since 2015, with now 6 years later, nearly 2 million persons crossing into Europe from Greece's sea and land borders, rather few trafficked persons were identified during the reception and identification process, applied to all migrants and refugees entering Greece, in the mainland or at the hotspots, the reception and identification centers, closed centers in the islands, where migrants are kept during their waiting for the asylum procedure to be completed. NGOs in the field mentioned that false promise of migration or immigration has been used by traffickers to recruit victims, while in some instances smugglers functioned as traffickers as they took advantage of further possibilities for profit in human trafficking. Yes, so indeed, we have to talk about profits, about money, about the chains. Frontline workers who may not have the tools or experience to deal effectively with the gender-specific needs of their population need additional support to incorporate gender equality programming, GBV awareness, sensitization, and capacity building on dealing with trafficking. So, of course, more training. Shame and stigma coming from a potentially inappropriate trained service provider also negatively affects the survivor's willingness to receive care or to report. Raising awareness in communities is also crucial. Working with men, migrant men, is also very important, and this is what our organization, Symbiosis, is lately very much involved in. The lack of well-trained cultural mediators, women in particular, at times limits the access to public health services very seriously. And of course, not to talk about the police. The pandemic COVID-19 response, mainly characterized by strict long-term lockdown in reception centers, has further exacerbated the tensions, pressures, and violence. And of course, the isolation and the total sort of imprisonment of victims. By the way, vaccinations in a country where vaccinations are moving well in relation to the EU average, very well actually, vaccinations of asylum seekers and refugees is only starting now, so lagging very much behind. This is the realities of people's lives. Despite the vulnerabilities of women and girls, their reproductive health needs go unmet, as women realize they may be stuck in camps or in what is called this limbo of waiting for asylum or recognition of being trafficked victims. They request long-term family planning options, contrary to the general assumption that they oppose family planning based on cultural norms and beliefs. You see, very often humanitarian providers and European states have very strict stereotypes. Yet not all health service providers offer these services, while contraceptives, especially long-term birth control, cannot be found in the camps. The hospitals lack staff trained in the clinical management of rape and often do not have post-exposure prophylaxis available, what we call PEPs, putting women and girls at heightened risk for unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections, and of course, making it very difficult to recognize what is going on. Indeed, the Greek government operationalized a multidisciplinary national repair mechanism, NRM, with appropriate standard operating procedures in writing at least. Government and civil society representatives reported the government began the implementation of the NRM. However, the government did not meet the minimum standards in several key areas. Asylum seekers often wait longer than a month for their screening due to the lack of staff and resources, and many things happen within a month, resulting in a trafficking survivor re-victimized in a migrant camp while waiting for legal documents and reception and identification center screening procedures. Each center designated a trafficking focal point who collected information on potential trafficking cases, but many staff working at these reception and identification centers are on short-term contracts, which limited their experience and training to identify victims. Often, these centers have more than 1,000 people inside or in their vicinity. So one trafficking focal point might not be enough, to say the least. Civil society and media continued to report incidents in which authorities allegedly, at least, assaulted and harassed refugees and migrants, forcibly removing them to Turkey. This is the infamous pushbacks. Greece temporarily suspended asylum applications from the north for the month of March 2020 in response to the movement of thousands of people in Turkey to the Greek border, considered the European Union border, the land border in Evros. But of course, the border closure prevented victims from self-identifying or cooperating with the authorities. Observers reported a lack of identification efforts for victims of forced labor, particularly in the agriculture sector, cleaning and domestic service, and the tourism industry. However, labor inspectors reported these difficulties in conducting inspections in rural areas and on islands due to the community receiving prior notice before inspections from local citizens. I must tell you that the migrants and refugee camps in the mainland, about 30, some of them being closed down now, often are situated in rural areas, in the vicinities of small towns, which means that they are often quite far away from the reach of trained police forces. Proactive identification amongst vulnerable unaccompanied children also remains inadequate, including for forced begging and forced criminality, but especially for sex work, or what is called sex work. International organizations report that some first responders could not distinguish between sex trafficking and commercial sex, rejected sex trafficking victims who self-identified, and at times sent them back to the traffic. The government lacked proactive identification efforts for forced labor. Government-run shelters lacked sufficient capacity, resources, and space to provide assistance and accommodation, with specialized support for victims remaining inadequate or inaccessible. Victims wait up to 2 years to receive official status, and court proceedings often last 2 to 6 years, which hinders cooperation from victims and key witnesses, especially if they are migrants and asylum seekers, which means that they often leave the country within these 2 or 6 years, and resulted in many acquittals of suspected traffickers.
Sorry,
overall, few convention on the finish.
But I wanted to add something to question, because this problem of low identification rate in Greece is something that we all see in other countries on the migration route. What do you think? Why this happens? Why the authorities fail to improve the identification process, or refuse to handle the identification process maybe in the proper way when it comes to migrants? So why do we have these low numbers of identified victims among migrants? What do you think?
The connection is really bad, so I don't really hear you.
I was asking, what do you think? Why do we have, not only in Greece, but also in other countries in the region, these low rates of identified victims of trafficking among migrants? Why do we have these low numbers?
Since this has been ongoing for nearly decades, and trainings have been ongoing also for almost 20 years now, amongst authority competent units and services, it is really surprising. I've been in relevant seminars actually in Serbia in the years 2000, 2006, 2008. So that is a very good question. I think that definitely the situation after 2015 reached a different level, which through the state services caught them by surprise and didn't know how to combat this. I also think that quite possibly the attention of the authorities has been over the past at least 6 years. So in a general situation, at least in Greece, where protection services were inundated and identification of extreme sexual violence and identification of traffic victims actually stopped being the priority. But unfortunately, not only for the authorities, but also for the service providers. And somehow, I'll give you a very concrete example. A couple of months back, I had a discussion with a protection manager from a humanitarian civil society organization, not national, actually international. And this protection manager, told me that a specific, an Afghani young woman who has been raped repeatedly during her journey to Greece and trafficked. And this was taking place also in the camp where she was residing, drank rat poison and to commit suicide, and she was in the hospital. So it seemed as if their priorities actually shifted towards saving this woman's life, trying to find out what would happen with a young child, that she was a single mother because of what happened in her journey to Greece. What would happen to the young child? Who would take care of the child so that the child would not be characterized as an accompanied minor and sent off to a safe zone in a different camp? Exactly what was mentioned before, children being separated from mothers. So, despite the fact that this particular protection officer was extremely well trained, the complexity of the problems was too much to actually bring to the fore that this woman was a trafficked person. This is an experience from field work. That's why I'm mentioning it.
Yes,
the authorities, this is a different issue.
Yeah, thank you for this, and thank you for bringing this issue of the identification, because it's one of the challenges that actually we all share in the countries on the Balkan migration route, and this is also one of the issues that was also tackled by the General Recommendation 38 and the CEDAW committee itself. For the moment, I want to thank both Despina and Dubravka, and we'll get back to you later. Just to move a bit to Ms. Dalia Lenarte, because I have a couple of questions for her. In regards of these challenges we have heard that are being happening on the ground. So CEDAW committee, through this general recommendation, tackled many of these challenges that Despina and Dubravka were saying. So please, could you tell us now, how does CEDAW committee plan, so to say, to make the state parties, the countries on the Balkan migrant route, but all over the world, which signed the convention, to implement the provisions from the general recommendation to tackle all these challenges and to, in generally speaking, decrease the vulnerability of women and girls? And how do you see actually the role of civil society in this respect? How we together, so CEDAW committee and civil society, can make state authorities provide these things being put in the general recommendations. As I have said at the beginning, so by the Article 21, CEDAW committee has the right to write these recommendations, so to say, explanations of the articles. So could you tell us actually to what level or extent these provisions from the recommendations are obligatory to state parties?
So thank you very much for giving me floor again, and I'm using this opportunity to say thank you for those examples from Greece and Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's really very valuable, and I just wanted also to bring my own angle to the question that you raised in regards of Greece, but it applies not only to Greece, as you said. So why victims of trafficking are not identified? Victims of trafficking, especially in women and girls. And one explanation is, and this is reflected in our General Recommendation 38, that in many cases, identification is performed only by border officials, by one or two border officials. But we say it's not enough. You have necessarily to provide an interdisciplinary team of identification of of cases of trafficking in women and girls. And we had actually received in the optional protocol some individual communications on this particular issue, that a woman, a victim of trafficking, she has not been recognized as a victim. And since it was clear that identification process was performed only by one or two border officials, we came, CEDAW committee and the optional protocol, we came to conclusion that CEDAW optional protocol was breached in this case, just because the identification process itself was performed not professionally. You cannot rely on one or two border officials, on, let's say, I don't know, some two officers. So it should be interdisciplinary team, one thing. Now, if we are talking especially, as it was mentioned, about identification and recognition and giving the status of victim of trafficking for women and girls who experience sexual, meaning sexual atrocities and forced prostitution, what I was talking in my introductory statement and answering to in regards of scope of our general recommendation, that is the point. Just because in countries where national laws and long national history, they do not make any even hint that prostitution is actually violence against women. And we are there trying to discern between prostitution as a consent between two adults. They actually say that it's not a case of trafficking for sexual purposes if a woman and girl agree to do this. So, and what we noticed, and what I noticed in my research, in countries where prostitution is legal, mostly neither civil society, I am speaking in general terms, but neither population at large, neither governments, police, they cannot recognize violence, meaning in terms of trafficking for sexual purposes, if prostitution is legal, because for them, if just victim would say that it was a consent, it's not a case of trafficking. And that is why in Greece, I have to tell, where prostitution is legal, it's very difficult for officials to have this mentality that actually there is no consent if we are talking about sexual violence in the framework of prostitution. I am not sure if I'm expressing myself well in this second hour of our webinar, but there is no sensitivity in countries where long history of national legislation accept so-called legal prostitution. So when we are talking about identification in terms of sexual violence, first of all, you should check what legislation is in regards of prostitution, whether it's Nordic model, whether it's legal, or whether it's criminalizes women, let's say, and after that you will understand more why identification is so difficult. So now implementation. What are tools, meaning for CEDAW experts that we have? What tools as a committee we have? We are not a human rights treaty body. as all 10 human rights treaty bodies, that would be responsible for implementation. We produced the document, and our own tool, legal tool, is constructive dialogues through which we are trying to convince national governments to change national laws in accordance to CEDAW's legislation. That's all what we can do. Now we have constructive dialogues, and after constructive dialogue, CEDAW committee, as you know, produces recommendations and concluding observations and recommendations for the state party. And here, the role of civil society is extremely important, just because, as I said, for years we have been lacking shadow reports from civil society or from civil society who would be present during the constructive dialogue of their respective countries, so that they would let us know what the situation in regards of trafficking in women and girls in their respective countries. Because some civil societies are very much active. They would come to, they write shadow reports, and this is one basic tool to reach our committee, so that the questions that are formulated in their shadow report, we then introduce during the constructive dialogues, because all governments, they are trying to look like better in the eyes of human rights treaty bodies. But when we have a very reliable questions from civil society, we raise those questions. For example, you can raise questions why prostitution is still legal in Greece, or we want to change the status of prostitution, or criminalization of women in prostitution, or certain recommendations regarding identification of migrants. And then when the question is raised during the day of constructive dialogue, it must be, can be, might be translated to already the final recommendations for the governments. And what civil society who is really active do, they reach us personally. Experts, they reach us personally, and they are trying to convince, to raise, of course, it must be reliable, it must be very well prepared, to raise 1 or 2 or 3 questions during the dialogues. That is how we work with civil society in order to have more comprehensive, more good recommendations for state parties. So then you would have it. And another issue is that our general recommendation right now are translated to some documents for all OSCE countries. You will see soon that now we are cooperating with OSCE, and Serbia, I believe, is part of OSCE.
Yeah.
So that would be another tool.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Leinarte. We have actually slowly to get to the finalization of this event today, because the time is running. I had lots of other questions for you and also for our colleagues, Despina and Dubravka, but actually I just want to jump on with another question to our colleague Hajar, and I will ask her to tell us how does, from her perspective, the situation looks now, and if she thinks that some things have changed since she was in migration. So, Hajar, do you see any improvements or any changes in respect of the position of women in migrations? And after you, I will get to the conclusion of this event, because as you have seen, we are already almost 2 hours on board. So please, Hajar, your short answer.
Yes. I cannot say some things it shows really negative things, because we always shows like that. But I heard a lot, and I can understand all of the problems. Most of that, I can understand that identification is really hard. Yes, I can understand. And another problem is really hard. And this is hard to suddenly coming, lots of people suddenly come to a country, and it's really hard for that people to accept something new. For all of the people, is really hard to accept suddenly something's new. So all the things we can understand. And as I was, when the time I was migrate from my country, I understand all the government have a different, different strategy. As I remember some of the cities, some of the countries I loved with people, I was always thinking like, oh, when I arrived to my home, that home that I made, when I got some ID and some things to, I could travel somewhere, I will come back this city. It's Belgrade is one of that city. I'm telling here without any kind of I really loved Belgrade. I was thinking too, I love this people, I love this city, and I will come back. But there was some city that when now I'm hearing that city's names, I'm saying, no, never. I will not travel that city again. But the things I recognize now is that, first of all, when the COVID-19 is starting, something bigger is starting, and the world is starting to attention to something bigger. And then now is COVID-19 is coming down, and the people is remember the migration and this subject suddenly. But the things that make me a little bit sad is in a state they are thinking the problem, they are thinking to how we can fix, unlock the borders, and how we can put this migration in my country, how we can put them out back. Can you understand me? So like they don't want to accept it, they don't want to solve the problem, they are thinking how we can take these people and put it back. And this is make me sad. Like my country, Afghanistan, is had the contract to, yes, you can send the migration back to Afghanistan, and this is the safe country. No, I cannot understand Afghanistan is safe country. How my government told that the Afghanistan safe country, give me that money, yes, give me that money, Afghanistan is safe country, send all of that people to me. And those countries is thinking, okay, it's better for me, for my peoples, we can lock the borders and we can put that peoples back. I hope the countries is make that strategies. They knows the strategies. I heard really good strategies. I hope they implement it, and they are thinking to how to solve the problems. And I'm hopeful, as I see, there is a cities, as I told, there is a countries, as I told, they are helping the refugees, they are attention to the woman. As we all have this webinar, because this webinar is to how we can help that woman, there is people to not forget, and there is people who want to help. I hope this is improve to all the governments, all the countries, to helping that big problem, instead to give just some money and put them back them on the trouble. Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you, Hajar, for sharing all of these thoughts with us. And as we have to close, we are quite close to the end. I would just ask our colleagues Despina and Dubravka for their last thoughts. If they see, for instance, the space for improving the cooperation between civil society and CEDAW committee and different actors in order to make this situation better. So do you see this space? Please, Ms. Siri and Ms. Vranianac, and be short as we have to close the event. First, Ms. Siri.
It would have been great to close with Ms. Mohammadi comments. That would have been the better ending to such a webinar, and her call for actually rationality in understanding and humanity. But having worked with many different international organizations, intergovernmental organizations, and many international NGOs, local NGOs, national NGOs, to me, what is important is to understand that as civil society activists, it is only strength in unity that can be the solution in very difficult times where democracy overall is in dire straits, and where, for example, we have international agreements such as the Istanbul Convention being threatened and abused and killed. So when it comes to cooperation about civil society organizations, and of course, keeping in mind the difficulties in fundraising and in having enough resources to bring you to the position where you actually communicate your advocacy and your opinions to international bodies that ask civil society organizations for feedback or actually food for thought, then I think that it would be we have to put our efforts in sharing resources, knowledge, expertise, even resources ourselves. For example, our world has become translingual. We move from our national languages easily to English, and we hold all these digital webinars, whatever. It is far easier to work together, but definitely to bring migrants and refugees, migrant women and refugees inside these discussions, but not only the discussions, our practice, our praxis, our projects, our work, our daily interventions, in order to be able to confront what is a very difficult period ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Siri. Thank you very much for this thoughts. And please, Dubravka, your last thoughts on the question, if you see any space for improving the cooperation and bringing us all together on board for facilitating and improving the position of migrant women and girls. Please, Dubravka.
There is a lot of space to improve cooperation and to work further on supporting women and girls and supporting also those who are in specific protection risks. Unfortunately, the so-called crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina was so far considered as a humanitarian crisis. So the focus was really on the basic needs, on provision of shelter, food, non-food items, medical support. While we see that the needs and the risks are going much beyond that. So this is also a protection crisis, and in Bosnia there is a lot of space to start to mainstream protection more, including mainstreaming and awareness raising on the risk of trafficking and gender-based violence. There is a lot of space to start to introducing many of the capacity building initiatives, then identification and provision of support on the ground, and then monitoring the situation. So I believe that that in the upcoming period, we will have the more opportunities to really talk about the protection risk that women and girls face here, even though the general sense is that there are no many and that they will quickly leave the country. So there is no that much focus, even though there is a high need to have a focus on protection and everything that we talked about now.
Thank you, Dubravka. Obviously, there is space in which we can work together, in which we can be united from the same side of resolving all the problems and the challenges we tackled today and we talked about today. Now we all came to the end of this event. I really want to thank you all the participants, all the speakers for the event, and my special thanks to Ms. Dalia Leinarte for being with us today. I have to apologize that we didn't have sufficient time to ask all the questions, but unfortunately, these are never-ending stories. So I hope that we will have the opportunity to continue with these discussions in the near future, and that we will have the opportunity to see in real that this will be one of the last events that we're gonna follow it completely online. Therefore, I would like all of us to stay healthy. I suppose that you could hear something new, that you know better how to utilize this document, and that you will do so in your future work. I want to thank all of you for your comments in the chat box. And yeah, since the time is running, once again, thank you all, and see you, I hope, soon in live. I want to make thanks also to my colleagues from NGO Atina for the technical support, from Zorana, Angela, Jelena, and all the others. So please stay healthy and let's work together for decreasing the violations and trafficking of women and girls and make this world better. Thanks and bye.